Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the Detours in Music podcast. Today we have a really special episode that I've been looking forward to since even just thinking of the idea for the podcast, and that's an interview with my dad, Dr. Eric Ruple, who is a professor of piano at James Madison University and is currently the interim director of the School of Music. I hope you enjoy.
I'm Eric Ruple. I'm on the piano faculty at JMU, but I'm since January have been the interim and acting director of the School of Music.
Awesome. Can you tell us how you got your start in music?
Well, like many people, I started it very early, particularly in piano. I started in first grade, and the reason was because I had a first grade teacher who said to my mom, "He's overactive, give him something to do, give him piano lessons." Mm-hmm. And so that was the beginning of it all, and I just never quit.
So it's kind of used as like almost a disciplinary action.
It was meant to, just kind of occupy my mind so I wasn't overactive in class. I'm not sure it helped solve that particular problem, but it did set me on a path.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And where did that path take you in attending schools?
Well, when I first started, we lived in California, and then we moved to Arizona, where the most important thing that happened there was that I got a really good teacher, and that was in 7th grade. So that really was a significant factor, probably more important than starting out in piano. So had a very good teacher who introduced me to more advanced music, got me into the habit of practicing a lot, thinking about being a music major. And then when I was in about 10th or 11th grade, I decided that's the way I wanted to go. Mm-hmm. And nothing really changed that.
I'm curious, actually, how your parents handled you saying that you wanted to major in music.
They didn't really object.
I've never heard anything about that, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't object to it. I think it was pretty obvious that that's what I was spending my time doing. I was practicing probably 4+ hours a day and driving the rest of the family out of much of the house. So with the sound. So my dad actually enclosed a room just to get me away from the rest of the family, soundproof room. And then I'd have my own kind of little hideaway place to be. Mm-hmm. But there really wasn't much of a question about there wasn't a concern about being a music major. There was probably a concern later on about how I was going to get a job, mm-hmm. but they were, to their credit, they didn't, we never had a big sit down and they said, well, what are you really going to do after this?
That's good.
I remember the relief that they had when I finally got a job, even though it was at the time a temporary one, but it was, that would have happened about 11 or 12 years later. They were pretty happy about that.
Good.
So anyway.
Yeah.
But then when I started going to school, I had a choice. I didn't really audition many places. I auditioned at Arizona State University and at University of Arizona. And I was just inclined to stick with University of Arizona, thinking that maybe saving a little bit of money on housing, living at home was a good idea. That ended up being a bad idea. So if I have one regret early on, it would be that I didn't just take the plunge right away, live off campus, which seems obvious to people now, but for me it seemed like a big stretch to go off campus as a freshman. I should have gone to Arizona State, although I did enjoy my some of the classes at University of Arizona, in particular a theory class, which I thought was transformational there, where we just analyzed big pieces of music. But other things got in the way, and I didn't really have a good relationship with my teacher, my first teacher at the University of Arizona. So after 2 years, I decided it was time to transfer, and that's when I did go to Arizona State. And that probably is the most significant thing that I did, was make that change. Very important to do that. I got a teacher who was really willing to work with me and take me through all the steps I needed to do as a freshman. I should have done as a freshman. And it it also got me away from home, which was a good thing. Got me to learn to kind of grow up in a way that I hadn't done before. So it was good on many levels.
Mm-hmm. Did you only go?
Oh,
There's
I
more.
guess I kept going to school.
Yep.
Went to master's there at ASU. Did that, and then after that, I decided to continue. I wasn't really sure where I was going at that point, but I ended up going to Cincinnati Conservatory and did an arts diploma there. And one reason that I decided to go there for that particular degree, I didn't think I was ready to do a doctorate yet. Didn't know if that was going to be something that I needed to do. I still wasn't career-minded. My goal was get the best education I could rather than what am I going to do with this afterwards. So I still wasn't thinking that way, which I think has worked out fine and it's a good thing. But the artist diploma, I thought, would do a couple things for me. One, it would give me something that most people didn't have, and it would look good on my resume. P.S. Nobody cared.
Yeah, I've heard that nobody believes that.
Nobody cared about that at all, so that part of it didn't work. However, it did give me 2 years to get a degree from a bigger school, which I wanted quickly, and I think that was significant. So I did that arts diploma. Then I decided, okay, it's time to do a DMA because I didn't feel like I was done with school. And again, I didn't do the DMA because I thought, okay, I need this to get a job, but I didn't feel like I was done learning.
Yeah.
So I thought about staying at Cincinnati, but made the better choice, I think, in the long run, and that was going to University of Michigan. So I went on to Michigan and stayed there for 4 years and finished the DMA there. In both the cases of the artist diploma and Michigan DMA, I think the most important thing there, besides getting the degrees, was the kind of contacts I made, the people I met, many of whom have stayed very important relationships through the years, and even today, my contacts, the fact that I went to University of Michigan, I think allowed for a lot of contacts that I still find valuable. In fact, last week I was in Chicago for a conference, and one day they had a breakfast for University of Michigan graduates. And there were probably 25 people in the room. So that was a big deal. Cool. And I think that's important. And I ran into somebody who I went to school with 30 years ago. So that's really the value of going to a big school like that is the good quality contacts you make. Obviously what you learn is important, and the degree is important, but that's been a nice benefit of going to a big school like that. Cool. That is how I got the job at JMU, because it was the summertime, late in the summer, people are desperate. JMU had an opening, and apparently the people here at JMU were asked to go talk to their former teachers and see if anybody's ready to take on a job in a month. So it just so happened that somebody here was also a student of my teacher, and so word got around to me about that possibility, and one thing led to another, and that's how I came here.
Cool. So in your undergrad, you did transfer schools, but is there anything else that you struggled with? I'd love to know that you struggled with something.
Well, I would, it depends on what struggle means, I guess. Yeah. I do know there were a couple times when I had to really come to grips with some things. I think my sophomore year, I remember being in a theory class. This was the one that I referred to that was a very, very great class. I thought theory was easy after freshman year because I had a good high school background. And suddenly one day I remember thinking, I don't know what's going on. So I had to kind of regroup and take it much more seriously. Fortunately, it was a great class, and it was very interesting, everything that was going on. So it took a while to get into that, but that was a lot of fun. it was a struggle. It was a kind of a moment of not being certain, but it was very good. And I think again that whole business about after 2 years me transferring, that was a pretty low time because I didn't know where I was going with that. I had another point at Michigan during my 4 years there. During the summer, between my first and second year there, I had a hand injury. And that was a real scary time because I didn't know, after that kept lingering on, and it ended up lasting almost a year, where I couldn't use my right hand very well. Then you really think about what you're doing, what you're going to do. And during the year, I tried to take advantage of it somehow, and I learned a lot of left-hand pieces, which is good. And being left-handed, it was an advantage. So I have ended up playing a lot of left-hand pieces, and I feel like I've got a strong left hand. But it was also very difficult thinking, what am I going to do if I don't fix this? And I went to, I don't know how many different kinds of doctors. And finally, after, again, about 10 months or so, found a way to work through that through muscle therapy, kind of, that I changed how I warmed up, changed how I sat, changed how I practiced, changed how I played. I went from a very tense kind of an approach that had never really been addressed properly, I don't think, to something that's very much more efficient and relaxed. And that was good. So obviously that was good. So the next year I started in again and got to full playing. But I think what was interesting about that was that I never really had anybody tell me how to do those things. I had to sort of figure that out for myself.
How to
how to play differently.
Avoid injury.
Yeah, how to avoid injury. It was something where I had to do it. And so if I started feeling a little bit of that pain or tension coming back, I had to stop and figure it out and not do that. So it was, I wouldn't say that I was self-taught at all, but some of those areas I had to figure out for myself. And I think sometimes that's not a bad thing in the long run, especially if it's knowing how you function the best. So how we practice sometimes is partly from our teachers, but partly what works for us, and how I learn to keep myself healthy. So even now, of course, I don't practice 5 or 6 hours a day, but there are some days I've had to practice an awful lot, and some days then I'll start feeling a little bit of stress in my hands that I know that I need to either stop or do things a little bit differently, or stretch, or some of the various things I've had to do to be able to continue on. And mostly, I'd say 95% of the time, that's worked pretty well. Every now and then I've got to take a break, or my hand will be bothering me for a couple days, but it's not anything I can't work with.
Good. I know as a teacher and as a father of a musician, you've probably given a lot of advice, but what's, I guess, your go-to advice for younger players who aren't having the easiest of times? And that can be maybe in the theory classes, maybe with practicing, anything like that.
Well, I think that going through hard times is part of how you develop. So one thing I think is true for any student is that you're going to have times when you're not sure what you're doing is helping, or what you're doing is working quite right. And I do think as a teacher it's good to give advice, to say, okay, here's how you can help yourself out, here's how you can help that. But I also think there are times when it's good to just kind of hold back and let you figure that out. Okay, it's not always easy to have an answer, and I think it's too easy to just want an answer.
Yeah.
And again, going back to the idea that not everybody's the same, I think part of figuring out what works is allowing students to come up with their answers themselves. I think some of the best relationships I've had with students mean that haven't been without some struggles from time to time, and part of that struggle is giving them just enough information maybe to go to the next step, but allowing them to figure it out, even when they sometimes think they want to have an answer, a better answer. I think sometimes a better answer is no answer right away. So I think that's a good thing to do. I know there have been times when I've seen you go through struggles of one kind or another, and I think that's sometimes, I think that's good to just let it happen.
Yes.
And sometimes, I don't know what the answer is going to be always with all that, but it's just like, in a sense, the parent child analogy is not different from a teacher and a student, where you just kind of hope that they go through all these things and come out the right way on that. So it's not so bad to let students struggle.
Yeah.
But some things that I think are useful, I think it's important that all students develop some kind of a consistent approach to practicing. There are many, many times when you just don't feel like it and you have to do it, and it's just painful to do that. But that's having that consistency. For me, for example, when I'm practicing a piece, even if I don't want to practice or don't know how to do it, I can go back and use metronome. Just kind of go through things and just practice a routine. And I think that on the most uninspired days is a good thing. But also, and there are many things that might work that way. Sometimes it's good to change up practicing, if I'm practicing 5 pieces and I'm doing them in a certain order every day, sometimes it might be a good idea to do them in a different order. Or the ones I'm spending the most time, maybe put them on the back burner a little bit, start practicing something different, just anything to freshen it up. Some people reward themselves. I tend to not do that, but it works at times. So we all have little tricks to try to get ourselves jump started to practice, but that's a really hard thing, is to be really consistent and moving forward. So those are a couple answers to that. I would say also, just in general, I think it's important to for students to think about, always go back to the music. And so if they're not feeling it or not inspired or something like that, then just go listen to something. Take a day off and listen to something else. Music can be very exciting and very, it's obviously challenging. That's why we're doing it, and it's not what everybody does. But I'd like to go back and listen to things, and then my staleness doesn't last very long.
Listen to something different?
Yeah, listen to something different. Of course, I listened to many recordings of the same thing, what I was working on back then. I think as I've gotten older, I've listened less to other recordings and just kind of trusted myself. Like, for example, when I did the Beethoven Concerto earlier this semester, the 4th Concerto, I didn't listen to anybody, didn't listen to it at all. And it kept it very fresh, but I didn't really want to be influenced by other performances or think, oh no, I'm doing this. So I tried to keep my own ideas fresh, and although of course I knew the piece, I didn't listen to anybody else do it during that time, just to stay fresh. And I think that helped. I think I enjoyed doing it that way. I heard it by accident one time on radio, but it was I was listening for the cadenzas anyway. So So those are a few things that I would say.
Okay. Have you ever been persuaded to change career paths? This might have happened, or you might have thought about it when your hand was injured.
Yes, I thought about it then. I didn't have any good answers. I think what I probably would have done had I not been able to continue would have been possibly go into a different aspect of music, like music theory, or more likely musicology.
Okay.
And of course, there was the times when, after that last semester finishing my degree, there was a several month period where I didn't really have a job. I didn't know where I was going to be. So that's a little bit scary. So I thought that I might have to, work in a bookstore or something. But in Ann Arbor, that's a good choice. That's where Borders started. So that was my career path change. But it didn't. Fortunately, it didn't happen. So things went pretty smoothly as far as that goes. Now, that goes into what I'm doing now, which is by being at either the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the wrong time. But currently, I'm not really teaching music. And although I'm performing some, I'm not doing that kind of contact with the piano all the time as I was. And I'm in a position where I'm, directing the School of Music and sitting behind a computer all day and doing that. That's not something that I would have ever imagined for me. I just wasn't interested in it. I thought that administrators were a different species, and they probably still are.
Yeah.
But I'm doing that at the moment. I might be doing it in the future. I might not. I have no idea. I first did that 8 years ago between directors here at the School of Music, and didn't really. I was very uncertain whether I wanted to do that in the future. So I was, in retrospect, I'm very glad I didn't do it.
Yeah. Because
I've had many opportunities in the last 7 or 8 years that I wouldn't have had. Done many concerts I wouldn't have been able to do. I'm very glad I didn't do that then. Now's a little bit different. I've been doing this this time, stepping in for someone else now for almost a year, almost exactly a year. And I'll be doing it again next spring. And then the question is what will happen after that. So I don't know what will happen after that. But I feel like if that becomes a permanent change, I'm much more ready to accept that. Because I think that I have a better vision for what we need as a School of Music, what I can do to help that. Although I certainly don't have all the answers of how that would happen. And I'm woefully inexperienced, but I think I'd bring to that job a knowledge of the university, a knowledge of people, and a real desire to help us through the next few years if that were to happen. So I'll be happy either way.
Yeah.
But that's a detour that I was not expecting.
It's like, has moving into administration or potentially permanently moving into it, would that be your biggest career detour, you think?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that would be doing something totally different. But I've just gotten back from a couple conferences where they have a lot of people like that, and they're all mostly people that, as far as I can tell, are like me. They were there, they didn't start out in terms of administration, but they sort of, we might say, fell into it one way or the other, or you could say it was a move up or a move sideways or a move differently, but it's definitely a different thing. I don't think it would allow me to do quite as much practicing and playing as before, but I want to keep my hand in it to some degree. So it's a very, very different kind of a job, different set of skills. But what I like about it is that you're there to help things run better, help people, and I have a lot of friends on the faculty who I try to help, try to help everybody, and try to help the program. So it's in part, it's out of my hands, whether that's going to happen or not, and that's fine.
Any final thoughts for the podcast?
Well, I think it's a great idea.
Thanks.
Yeah, I hope it's something that you'll continue doing, because I think it's a lot of people can get some insights into it. Not just you, but your massive listening audience of at least of dozens and dozens of people. And hopefully give you some ideas about what you want to do. It's been fun having you here at school for 4 years, 3.5 years.
Gone by quickly.
Yeah, it's the last semester coming up. But it's been nice getting a chance to broaden what I go to, like, for example, wind symphony concerts, which I didn't go to that often. Of course, I like going to orchestra concerts and hearing the orchestra anyway, but hearing you play, hearing you get to be, get some solos, and go to the chamber music concerts, go to all those things, get to know some more people in your friend group that are in that class. So that's a chapter I think will be sad when you leave, but we'll be interested to see what happens after that.
Yeah. So I assume that I'm not the only one that can relate to this sort of frustration as a student that Dr. Ruple was mentioning, that it's really easy to want an answer. I think all the time in my life, I look to my teachers, my parents, older mentors, and just want them to tell me what to do. And I think what my dad was talking about, he definitely does in his life, which is, you got to figure it out for yourself. And just because what works for me, it might not work for you. So I really enjoyed interviewing my dad, Dr. Ruple, for this episode, and I hope you enjoyed too. As always, you can contact me on the email detoursandmusicpodcast@gmail.com or Detours and Music Podcast Instagram account. Our next episode will feature JMU Voice faculty member Kevin McMillan. Thanks.